today is the most beautiful woman that I know in the room, my cohort, my rock when it comes to planning all of these things. And I'm so very grateful for you, Julie, that we could do this together. So obviously you all know Julie, and she's amazing. And she's a publisher, a speaker, an unapologetic advocate for women owning their own voice and their own value. As founder of the Women Like Me movement, she has helped hundreds of women share their stories, publish books, and lead boldly in business and life. Give it up for Julie.
Thank you, Kim. Aww. I know I have water here. There it is. Oh. Okay, there we go. All right. Well, I want to talk to you about what happens when one woman stops whispering. Have you ever felt a calling? And did you do that calling? Or did you put it on the backside? And if you did, why did you leave it sitting there? Did you feel that maybe you weren't smart enough? You weren't educated enough? How could you think that you could possibly do something like that? Well, that's what happened to me. In 2016, I was in my sales, marketing, and promotional career. And I had been in for about 26 years at that point. And I was super successful. But what comes along with being super successful is working your buns off. And I became burnt out. I didn't think burnout was real, but let me tell you, ladies, burnout is 100% real, and it makes you sick. And I was getting really burnt out. And so I started thinking, well, what am I going to do with my life? Because I've been doing this for so long. This is really all that I know. What could I possibly do? And how could I create that same kind of income that I was going to need for the rest of my life? So I was really frustrated. And that's when the whole internet thing was coming out. I mean, it was out before that, but I hadn't really jumped in and really accepted what was going on. And so I started getting on the internet and watching these ladies do their thing, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. And so I started snooping around, going to seminars, but I wasn't really sure, what it was I was going to do. And in the meantime, I'm still working my buns off, so I'm exhausted. I'm burnt right out. And then one night I had a dream. And I was in a very bright light, and I heard a voice say to me, Julie, you have to go back now. And in my dream, I felt massive anxiety. And I remember saying, but I don't want to go back. I want to stay here with you. And whoever this was in my dream, they said, well, you have to go back. You're not finished yet. And I could feel that I was being pulled, and I yelled out, but I don't know my purpose. And then the voice said to me, well, you were your purpose. And I thought, well, yeah, that makes sense, but it's not really helpful. Like, it still doesn't really help. What am I supposed to do with that? And so I was just so frustrated. And as I was being pulled, I remember yelling, but I don't know what to do. And I woke up, and the word right was in my head. So I thought, well, I guess I got to write books for salespeople, because that's what I did. That's what I was super successful at. So I started writing books for salespeople. But when you're burnt out in your career, the last thing you want to do is teach other people how to do it. Even if you're doing a good service for those people. But I was so burnt out. And I was doing it, and it was helpful, but I knew it wasn't what I really needed. Then in 2019, we had a tragedy in our family. And my 24-year-old niece died on the streets of Vancouver from a fentanyl overdose. she left a little fellow behind. It was just so sad. It shouldn't have happened. And I remember at the funeral, they had an open coffin, and she was beautiful, and she just looked perfect lying there, but of course she was gone. And I remember thinking, what a waste. What a waste. 24 years, that's all. And so that night after the funeral, I went home. This was in 2019, September. And I was in bed, and I wasn't dreaming, but I was so frustrated with what had happened because I knew that her death was an indirect or direct result of generational trauma. So it was my grandparents not fixing their stuff. It was my mom not fixing her stuff, which trickled on down to us and my siblings, and even myself, not fixing our stuff and passing it along to our kids. And I knew that that's what had happened, and that's why she died, and it shouldn't have happened, and it pissed me off. And so I laid there thinking, well, what can I do? I'm a salesperson. Like, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a counselor. What could I possibly do to fix this problem? I just knew I wanted to fix it. And I went to sleep, and in the morning I woke up and I started thinking, and I got these nudges, and I thought, my mom went through a very serious trauma, and that was part of the reason that our family went into chaos. And I thought, if she could have somehow gotten that trauma out of her body and out of her mind, maybe she could have healed somewhat, and then we wouldn't be so damaged, and our kids wouldn't be so damaged, and my niece would still be alive. And so I thought, we should write a book. So I phoned up some of my stepsisters and some of my best friends and said, do you guys want to write a chapter of your life in a book with me? And every single one of them said yes. And so in December of 2019, the very first Women Like Me book was published. That was 3 months after my niece passed away. Last weekend, we launched our 32nd Women Like Me book. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And, but why did it happen? Why was that generational trauma happening? And I started thinking a lot about it, and I thought a lot about it with 32 books later. And what I realized is that we have a lot of silence in our families. The trauma my mom had was she was 30 years old, and she was doing what newly single 30-year-old women do. They go out to the nightclub, they dance the night away, they have a few drinks. And she was with two of her friends. And at the end of the night, they elected that my mom drive because she seemed to be the most sober. But it wasn't even my mom's car. So my mom jumped in the driver's seat. The other two ladies hopped in the car. And it was a very rainy night. And on the way home, my mom sideswiped a semi. And her very best friend was pulled out of the car and killed. And 3 little girls lost their mom that night. And I know my mom didn't die, but we lost my mom too. She was never the same. I was 10 years old at that time. I can honestly say that I can't remember a nice thing that was ever said to me or any of my siblings from the time that I was 10 years old. I was never cuddled, I was never hugged, and as an adult, I understand how she felt knowing that 3 little girls was her fault, that their mother was gone. So my mom had a lot of issues, and back then, today she'd probably go to jail. Back then, they took her license away. I don't know if she was on probation, but we didn't talk about it, and that's the point. Nobody talked about what happened, ever. It was never talked about. And so my mom went downhill and took a lot of us with her. A lot of alcoholism, there was crime in the family, there was a lot of spousal assault, you name it, it was going on in our family. If you've seen the TV show Shameless, that was it. That was it. So it It was just silence, and nobody talked about it at all. Years later, and I'm talking 2024, I decided to write my life story because I hadn't written it yet. Helped all these other ladies, but it's like, well, what about your story, Julie? I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess I should write mine. So I wrote my story. And when it came out, one of my stepsisters bought the book. And she read it, and then she messaged me. And she said, how come I didn't know about what happened to Mom? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know. You were younger? I don't know. We just something nobody talked about. We just did not talk about this. And then she was silent, and then she said, I thought she hated me. And I said, she didn't hate you. She hated herself. And it got me thinking, you would have thought she hated every one of us, the way she treated us. But she didn't. I know she didn't. But she couldn't bring herself to love us the way we needed to because of the guilt and the shame and the horridness of what she had done, drinking and driving. But what I thought was so, I'm going to say the word amazing, but amazing in the sense that my stepsister spent 40 years of her life thinking my mom hated her. If we'd talked about it, maybe she wouldn't have had that. And I know this has affected her. And so then I start to think about all my other siblings. There's 11 of us. And I start to think about everybody else. And for sure, not everybody knows. I guess they do now because they probably read my story. But back then, they didn't know it. And so I can tell you that, she was angry. And my brother was tied to a chair. Another brother was sent to foster care. It was just, but nobody talked about why this was all happening. And of course, as little kids, you walk around on eggshells. You know something's wrong, but you don't really understand what's going on. So I want to ask all of you, what's happening in your families? What's happening with friends that you know? What kind of secrets are being kept that nobody's talking about? And the truth is, you might not think it's affecting anybody because you've been quiet, but everybody feels it in the family. They might not know why they feel it. They might not understand it, but they walk around on eggshells and they don't and they just don't understand it, and it can cripple them. So there's ways to get help. Writing isn't the only way. There's counseling and therapy and lots of different ways to heal and get your story out. But this is what I was given. And so when the women like me, and I have all these beautiful women, hundreds of them now, who have written their personal stories, it's hard for them in the beginning. They're scared. They're nervous. They haven't, maybe they've been keeping it in silence, so they haven't put it out there. They haven't even had a conversation about it. Sometimes I'm the first person that they're actually talking to about what they're going to be writing about. And sometimes they ghost me, and sometimes I chase them on the computer. Hello, are you still there? Remember, you're supposed to be writing your story. And they do. And what they tell me in the beginning, and I can tell you every single woman has said this to me, if by telling my story can help just one woman, then everything will be worth it. And so when they write, they heal. I see it. They become lighter. They get it out of their body. They get it out of their minds. And also the other thing that happens is, and some traumas are pretty nasty. Some of the things some of these ladies have gone through are not nice at all. But when we live in silence, we create a bigger monster in our minds. And when we start to talk about it, we shrink that monster down so that it gets smaller. It's not as bad. I mean, it might be bad, but it's not sometimes as bad as what it grows into because you're keeping it in silence to yourself. Then after the women write their stories, we publish them. And that's the key, because it's one thing to write your story on a piece of paper and talk to me about it. It's another thing to publish it in a book and send it out into the world for everybody to read. Not just people that you know, but people you don't know. And so what happens during that process? Women turn from shame to pride. It's amazing. It all goes away because you can't be shameful and publish your story out there into the world. So all of a sudden, all that shame is gone, and there's a huge sense of pride that is felt. And that's where all the healing begins. And I've seen it time and time again. Some women come and they write, and then they don't write again. And then other women have written in almost every one of our books. So once again, I want to ask you, what's going on in your family? What skeletons are in the closet that have been there for a long time that maybe need to come out? They say that 4 generations. So if we talk about, for example, my mom, well, we're talking me, my kids, my grandkids, and my great-grandkids, if we don't stop it. And in the meantime, who knows what other trauma is going to pop in there that none of us decide we want to deal with, and it just continues to go on and on. So talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your loved ones, talk to your parents, and try to have honest, open, and non-judgmental conversations. We shouldn't feel bad for what was given to us. It was a gift that none of us wanted, but it was wrapped in a pretty little family gift and plunked on our shoulders. And we didn't ask for it, but it was handed down to us. And we're going to hand it down to our kids, and we're going to hand it down to the next generation, just like what happened to my niece. My mom, my brother's a drug addict. My niece ends up onto drugs. Now she's dead. My brother has a stepson. I'm surprised he's still alive. And it's just continuing on and throughout the family. So what is happening out there that you can help someone just by bringing stuff out and talking about it? Because if we think in silence we are protecting anyone, we're not. And we're doing damage. We just don't see the damage that we're actually doing. So, if you want to write your story, come and do it with me. I'd love to have you there. There's no cost for women to write their stories. The hundreds of women, the 32 books that have been published, not one woman has paid 1 penny for that program to be done. I want to stop generational trauma. I want to help other people not have to go through the sadness and the devastation that our family has gone through with my niece and other family members. They're still here, thank goodness, but they're not in good shape. But we can stop it. We don't have to, we shouldn't feel guilty. I don't feel guilty. My brothers, my sisters, they shouldn't feel guilty about what's happened. But once we realize it, it's our responsibility to stop it. And that's what we need to do. We need to be aware, and we need to stop it. So come with me. Let's stop generational trauma, one story at a time. Thank you.